The Hills alum Kristin Cavallari once had a very close relationship with Kourtney Kardashian, but that was tainted when a rumor spread like wildfire that she hooked up with the Push founder's then-boyfriend, Scott Disick, in 2011. Instead of believing Kristin, who was positive Scott planted the story for the tabloids, the Kardashians axed Kristin from their lives. According to the Laguna Beach Star, it was a tactic used to distract people from Kim's short-lived marriage to Kris Humphries. Interestingly, in a November episode of her Let's Be Honest podcast, in which she detailed the rumored fling, she shared that, oddly enough, Scott had DM'd her wanting to meet up. Kristin called it textbook manipulation by the Kardashians after she had trash-talked them. Were the Kardashians looking to silence her? Kristin even read Scott's entire message on her podcast, blasting him and the reality stars. However, Roni, Erin Litchie came to Scott's defense, which surprised fans. What is her connection to the father of three? After Kristin Cavallari called out the Kardashians for using Scott Disick as a way to silence her from trash-talking the reality TV stars, Real Housewives of New York City star Erin Litchie came to Scott's defense. Fans found this odd as they've never really heard of Erin and Scott possibly having some sort of relationship to one another. However, taking to Instagram, Erin shared that she and Scott hung out together when they were younger, especially in the Hamptons. I'm feeling like I need to weigh in a little bit. Like it's bothering me. I actually grew up pretty good friends with Scott. We were in the same group. Especially in the Hamptons, she said in her video. Erin continued by stating that she thought Scott was a great guy and that he is not a bad person, despite Kristin calling him out on her podcast. The reality star added that she was confused by Kristin calling Scott's DM manipulative because it sounds like a nice person reaching out and just being like, I've been through a lot. People forget that like both his parents died, like the guy went through a lot, he's not a bad person. For a little backstory, Scott was born and raised in Eastport, New York, a hamlet located in the eastern end of Long Island's Hamptons region, so it would make sense that the two would see each other. In an interview with Spotlight Hamptons, Erin shared that she grew up coming out here, so I have lots of memories. She added, for us, the Hamptons has everything. Despite Erin defending her friend, it didn't seem like she actually listened to Kristin's entire podcast episode to understand why she called out Scott in the first place. For those who did listen to Kristin's podcast episode titled, Cavallari is a freakin' train wreck, the former reality star debunked old, salacious headlines about herself. The first one she read was in connection to her allegedly hooking up with Scott while he was on a break with Kourtney during a trip to Las Vegas in 2011. Kristin recalled being friends with both Scott and Kourtney when the two were dating. However, that all changed when a tabloid ran a story that suggests she had a fling with Scott when he broke up with the Kardashian star. Not only was the story not true, but Kristin believed that Scott planted the story himself as a distraction. How it was worded, our mutual friend, Stu, and I both were like, oh my God, it's Scott who did this, to get Kourtney back. Kristin attempted to tell Kourtney that the story was a huge lie, but the latter didn't believe her. Well, I don't know. I have sisters and I just would never put myself in that situation, Kourtney reportedly said. Kristin added that Kourtney just wanted a reason to not be friends with me anymore. Kristin ended up doing an interview to defend herself and was hoping the Kardashians would do the same. However, that never happened. Kristin believed that the news story was a great distraction from Kim's messy divorce from Kris Humphries. Oddly enough, after ripping on the Kardashians for the past couple of months, Kristin revealed in the same podcast episode that she received an Instagram DM from Scott asking her how she was and if they wanted to catch up and just talk about the stress and all the different things you gotta go through with kids. The two had not spoken to one another for nearly 20 years. After reading the private message, she told her listeners, Scott, you miss me after 17 years? No, that timing is not lost on me that as I'm ripping on the Kardashians for the Uncommon James founder, she couldn't believe that the Kardashians had sent in Scott to do their dirty work. Scott was reportedly not too pleased with Kristin reading his private message on his podcast. According to page 6, an unknown source, who could very well be one of the Kardashians plating yet another story, stated that Scott found his old buddy's actions disrespectful. Scott has no idea why Kristin thinks his text to her was manipulative, and that's not at all how he intended it to be interpreted, the source said. They added, Scott doesn't understand why Kristin felt the need to read something he felt was a personal message between them out to the entire world. The insider claimed that Scott was just being genuine in reaching out to Kristin. He's really surprised by the way she reacted and didn't see that coming at all. Scott feels like she could have declined or even ignored the message if she wasn't interested, the source expressed. Fans had rallied around Kristin for being so real. Comments under her very truthful episode read, I am obsessed with how honest and blunt Kristin is. Tell it. We want to hear the real truth. Another read, spill the tea honey, I love this, and good for you for speaking up and setting the record straight for you. We can all see who's real and who's fake. We know you are a real one and we love that about you. And when it comes to Erin, maybe she should focus on spicing up Roni, which saw devastatingly low ratings this season.